branding is about that feeling created, and consistency can help that feeling be familiar.
Like, can you imagine if some of the famous brands aren't consistent? It would be a disaster. We have the power to influence other people's decision making.
So brand consistency really matters to ease our decision making for our customers.
Hello and welcome to the Maker Elevate Chat series. I'm Kate, your host, an award-winning brand designer, helping SMEs to elevate their business into a brand. Joining me today is Jing Reilly, a cyber psychologist with more than 10 years marketing experience. Together, we are going to share reasons and tips as to why building a consistent brand will be of benefit to your business.
In our last video, we actually chatted about, a consistent experience when a customer is experiencing your brand. In this video, we're going to just look a little bit deeper into what a consistent brand looks like. So whether a customer is on your social media page, in your physical store, or on your website, how everything looks should feel the same. We talked about feelings in our last video. It's a feeling that's created by a brand. Everything should feel the same. And what I mean by feel the same, and this look and feel that I talk about, is the color palette that you use, the fonts that you use, the image style, how the logo is positioned, and how the brand feels. So, for example, a feeling is an experience. And if you were to go into, for example, into McDonald's, we're all familiar with the yellow and red colors that we're usually greeted with. If everything was purple and the packaging was now in plastic rather than the paper that we're used to, something feels off. Something doesn't feel right. We feel like we're in the wrong place. Did we walk into McDonald's? And you get that feeling because you're so used to what a brand has already pre-decided, and we've become accustomed to that. We've created a feeling of comfort in what we were used to. And a cohesive brand will look professional, and it creates that familiar feeling that I'm talking about. It also shows that you take your business seriously. If you care about your brand, it shows that you care about your customers. But it's about your consistency. So showing that you have a good visual match between everything that your customer will experience. It's so important to know that they know they're in the right place when they're on your website. And if I could ask you a question on this, Jing, what role do you think consistency plays in that decision-making process?
Yeah, consistency is very, very important. From a psychological and behavior science perspective, that consistency has two main roles. One, it's a shortcut. Because we make so many decisions, and so our brain is constantly looking for patterns, and we can't help with that. So we can't stop looking for patterns. For example, if I give you a few numbers, 5, 10, 15, you're automatically thinking the next number will be 20. So if, I suppose in the context of branding, if your shops look slightly different and providing different experience, and that will disrupt the customer's experience with your brand. So if I go to Brown Sugar for my haircut, which I do, and I get gin and tonic on arrival when I'm waiting, and if I go to a different Brown Sugar and they don't provide that, and I'd be disappointed, right? So that's a negative feeling when you have. Yeah. Just using the hairdresser example because so I'm dying to go to hairdressers at this point. Yeah. So, and then the second role it plays is that we're all associated machines, as in humans are associated machines. And so we make decisions based on the things that we already know and the experience that we have. And, every time we see something, we're trying to recall from our memory. Have we seen it before? Is this relevant? Is this similar to something else? So, and I can give you another example is that sometimes if you do it really smartly and you don't even have to mention the word, people will associate your brand. And so if I give you 3 words, cottage, Swiss, and cake, can you think of a word that associates with all 3?
I think they're all delicious, and I think I'm going to say cheese.
Yes, and no cheese was mentioned, but cheese is, we think about cottage cheese, we think about Swiss cheese, and we think about cheesecake. So it's that kind of a thing, is that we're associating these words with another words that we already know.
You can actually, just by using words associated with a brand, you can actually evoke that emotion in someone. And your example of the hairdresser is perfect. Like that's two hairdressers that are under the same brand that need to be consistent from one store to the next. And if example, you would be disappointed if you didn't get the same experience in the other, or if they charged differently, or if the colors weren't the same. Something feels off. Something doesn't feel right. So branding is about that feeling created, and consistency can help that feeling be familiar.
Exactly. Like, can you imagine if some of the famous brands aren't consistent? It would be a disaster. Can you imagine if Disney isn't consistent? And imagine the whole family sitting down and watching a Disney horror movie, and that's not going to work, is it?
Disney is a fantastic example, because that's something that evokes emotion in everybody.
Yeah.
Disney is something um, that you're very aware from a small age. And if you go to Disneyland or Disney World, you are expecting excitement, you're expecting magic. And that has been predetermined by Disney, that has been considered heavily. Um, but I remember seeing a post that you wrote about familiarity. And is there any research, Jing, maybe you can shed some light on this, that of how consistency and familiarity can help build a successful brand?
Yeah. Um, I'm glad you read that post, actually, because it is one of my kind of key interest area. So familiarity, we can think about unfamiliarity, familiarity, consistency, and inconsistency. So when we talk about familiarity, I use example about the feeling, because it's easier to actually connect with people about how we feel. So familiarity links to the feeling of fitting in
Mm.
or not fitting in. So as somebody who's from a completely different background and culture, that I've had experience where I didn't feel that I fit in, or other people felt the same, that I didn't fit in. But what it all boils down to is actually, it's, that heavy. So I've had a heavy feeling, sad feeling about, oh, I don't fit in, is there something wrong with me? Or it's not at all. What it all boils um, down to is that I provided, or I brought an unfamiliar experience to the group, and vice versa. But the good news is that this unfamiliar feeling isn't fixed.
Mm.
And one of the simplest way to resolve that is by being consistent.
Mm.
And by being consistent, you will be able to give yourself a chance to turn that unfamiliar experience into familiar experience.
Mm. Like
Um,
if you were, like you said before, if you were acting out of character, even as a human being, you might
yeah,
something was odd.
it is like, if I act out the character as a brand, or as a human being, we find it very hard to trust this person if the person is just very unpredictable and always changing. You don't know what the person is going to do next, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if a brand is acting out of character and doing something that's unfamiliar to us, and we're going to think something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually want to use a recent example. I don't know if you've seen the Friends Reunion
I have,
episode.
yes, I have, yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it was nostalgic again,
Yeah,
feeling the
yeah,
brand of Friends is a good feeling. Yeah.
yeah. So what I was watching, I kind of noticed, and so my husband, and so a million people actually in the world have noticed something was off with Matthew Perry, and unfortunately, um, that some people kind of wrote some quite mean and cruel comments and made some kind of mean judgments
Yeah.
towards him. And but if you consider what he's been through, and you know it's kind of understandable to some people, but we also need to be aware and be mindful that there are people who are judging based on their own expectation and what they're familiar with, which is the character of Chandler. And when that wasn't delivered, and that's when
there was unease with that.
Unease with that experience.
Yeah.
And it's just human nature.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And I suppose branding can go as deep as that, as the character itself. And from a, from a small business point of view, from our customers, how can we help them in the decision making that your brand is the one to become part of, become loyal to buy from?
That's a really good question, Kate, because I think, this is one thing I want the audience to take away, is that we have the power to influence other people's decision making. So in terms of helping them to make the right decision, is that you have to first consider that how many decisions we actually make a day. On average, actually, you might want to give a go and guess, on average adults, how many decisions do we make?
I couldn't even put a number on it. I couldn't. But what is it?
35,000.
Wow. God almighty. No wonder I need a nap.
We all do. Our mind need a nap, and that's why our mind to take a lot of mental shortcuts. And no wonder, our system one, automatic system, does 98% of the thinking for us, because we can't rely, our system two will not be able to cope with 35 decisions a day, and it's exhausting, right? So as a brand, sorry, that's my dog. As a brand owner or brand designer, I think that whatever you can do to help them to make the decision, and the right decision, and remove the friction along the way, and they will be thankful to you. Because who wants to constantly use system two to make all these decisions? It's just too tiring.
It's exhausting. Yeah, no, you've made some really good points there, Jing. So just to summarize our chat today, in a world that has become even more complex, to build a successful brand, consistency really matters to ease our decision making for our customers, and to allow them to get that sense of familiarity with our brands in order for them to buy from us. So the tip from today's video is being consistent helps your customer to know what to expect from the brand and what to expect from that experience, and in turn that will build better brand loyalty. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jing.
You're welcome. Really happy to be here.